To talk ACC football. Andrea, how are you today?
Wait, are we not talking about Jodeci? We're talking about ACC football?
Do you have something to say?
Guys.
Do you have something to say about Jodeci?
I love Jodeci. I was actually listening to Jodeci music the other day randomly because I'm like, oh, this is so good.
Can I give you a behind-the-scenes look at our show? My co-host, Steve, was completely terrified to come out of the break with Jodeci come and talk to me because it was embarrassing.
Well,
he didn't
I thought
want
it was
to
a
guess.
little bit slow, and I didn't want you to be like, what is that? What kind of show am I on? They're bumping back with Jodeci. So thank you for proving me wrong. I'm glad that you were pleased to hear that song.
I was so happy. Although "Cry for You" is in like one of my top 10 all-time like 90s R&B songs, probably higher than "Come and Talk to Me." So I'm just saying we could have a full discussion on Jodeci at a later date.
Would you find it hard? We were also discussing. Would you find it hard to pick 7 of your favorite songs?
Like your top 7? Like how hard would that be if you had
impossible.
to pick? Right. Okay. So I agree with you.
Impossible.
Yeah.
Like I mean, there are so many. And again, like I think we're showing our age here, and my kids just cringe every time like I have the old school R&B on in the car because I'm just rocking out and singing every word to every song. But like 90s R&B is where it's at, and I don't think I could pick the top 7. I'm going to try though. You guys are inspiring me. I'm going to try.
Well, if you love 90s R&B, you would fit in very well with this show. I will say that. All right, let's talk some football, and let's start with Syracuse. And you know the deal, right? They come off 10 wins. They get off to this 3-1 start. Everybody's super excited around here. And in that game against Clemson, they lose Steve Angeli, and it's been 3 losses since. Kind of a 2-part question. What do you make of this team as a whole right now? And do you think they would have a better record if Steve Angeli were still healthy and still quarterbacking this team? What do you think their record would be?
Well, let me get out the magic 8 ball. I don't know what the record would be, but I think it would be better than what it is right now. I mean, to go on the road and beat Clemson and his performance in that game, I think just shows you the potential of what Syracuse could have been if he stayed healthy. And look, this is not just a Syracuse thing, right? If your starting quarterback goes down injured, chances are you're not going to have as much success as you would have with your starter. And so I don't think that's isolated to Syracuse. And if you look at the top teams right now in the ACC, Virginia upgraded at quarterback, and Chandler Morris has stayed healthy, and they're 6-1, right? Look at Haynes King and the job that he's done at Georgia Tech, and he has been healthy for the most part last year. When he wasn't healthy, they struggled a little bit, right? So quarterback, to me, oftentimes is the key to success, and we look at what Kyle McCord did a year ago for Syracuse, and so it's just unfortunate that that's the cards that Syracuse was dealt this year and that Steve went down. But I have a lot of faith and optimism that once he comes back next year, we'll see much better things from Syracuse. I really do.
All right, so along those lines, has your opinion of Fran Brown changed at all over the course of the last month, or do you just chalk it up to quarterback, as you just said? Anybody loses their starting quarterback, they're going to take a hit. Are you still very high on Fran Brown, or has your opinion changed a little bit?
No, my opinion hasn't changed. I think we need to have, more evidence with a healthy quarterback, right? And look, Ricky Collins is trying his best. But there's a reason they went into the portal in the spring to bring in Steve Angeli, right? There were obviously some shortcomings that the staff saw throughout spring practice, and even though Fran named Ricky the quarterback, when you're going in the portal and trying to bring in a veteran, that probably indicates that, okay, we need some help here at the position, and then the difference in the way that both these quarterbacks have played, I think just shows you what Syracuse probably had a glimpse of in the spring. Now, having said that, they need to play more complementary football, obviously, and I know Fran has been disappointed in some of the play calling and not being able to get the run game going, and I think probably some of that is because teams know if we take away the run and put it all on the quarterback, you're going to have a greater level of success, and Syracuse have to figure out a way around that. But no, my opinion on Fran has not changed, and I bet if you talk to other national folks, they would probably tell you the same thing.
I love checking out your ACC Power Rankings every week with not just the teams, but your emojis, and it's very clever and it's very well done. You've got Georgia Tech as your number 1 team, and obviously they're undefeated. They're ranked 7th. So I get why they would be at the top of the power rankings. Do you look at them as the best team in the ACC? Are they one and the same, or can they be different? Can the top team in your power ranking, can it be lower than number one in terms of who you think the best team in the conference is?
That's a great question because I have done that. I did that early in the season. I had Florida State number one after they beat Alabama. Were they the best team in the ACC after beating Alabama? Miami fans jumped all over me, and rightfully so, because they're Miami fans and they're seeing Florida State at number one and not their own team, so of course they're going to be mad about that. But I had Florida State number one in the power rankings for the first 3 weeks of the season, even though I had Miami ranked higher in my top 25. And the reason is because power rankings is who's playing great right now in the moment, and also what are the wins that you've had and what is that value in where you should be ranked. And I put a lot of value on Florida State beating Alabama. In hindsight, maybe not a great call because of what's transpired over the last 4 weeks. But of course, Miami now has lost 2. So I guess the question is, Georgia Tech the best team, or is Miami the best team, or is Louisville the best team after what we saw, or is SMU the best team after what we've seen these last few weeks? Right now, my power rankings and my top 25 that I submitted are the same. I have Georgia Tech as number one power rankings and the highest ranked ACC team right now when I do my top 25. First of all, they're undefeated. And second of all, it's hard for me to doubt a team that has Haynes King at quarterback right now. And I know there have been some tough games. Wake Forest, they had to pull that one out. It looked a little dicey in the opener against Colorado, tough against Duke. But that second half performance against Duke and the way their defense played, honestly, was enough for me to say, okay, right now, it's absolutely Georgia Tech. Now, could that change next week or the week after? Sure. But I do reevaluate and redo these rankings every single week. And a lot of it is dependent on how teams look, how they play, and who they've beaten.
All right, you look at their remaining schedule. Obviously, you know that Georgia Tech has Syracuse next. So they've got SU this week, and then NC State, BC, Pittsburgh before they finish up with Georgia, which for the sake of this argument doesn't really matter because it's a non-conference game. So I guess what is the percent chance in your mind that they run the table? Like, do you feel pretty confident right now saying if you had to pick an ACC title game matchup that Georgia Tech, you feel pretty confident Georgia Tech's going to be there?
Georgia Tech used to play in the Coastal Division, so it's really hard to say I'm confident in any team that played in the Coastal Division, right? I mean, and it feels like coastal chaos, which is the term we used to use for that division, because at any given week, anything could happen. I feel like it's overtaken the entire conference at this point. And honestly, if you look at my top 7 right now, there's most of the teams played in the Coastal. SMU wasn't here, and Louisville's the only Atlantic representative. And so I feel like because of that, I'm expecting chaos the last 4 weeks of the season. And look, when you look at who Georgia Tech has left, I think a lot of people are going to be like, oh, well, they should run the table. Well, I'm not necessarily sure about that. NC State, I think they'll beat Syracuse, and again, a lot of it is because of their limitedness, if that's even a word, at the quarterback position. But they have to play at NC State. Raleigh is a really difficult place to play for anybody, no matter who you are. It's a great home environment for NC State, and I think NC State has shown flashes of capabilities of being pretty good. BC's bad. They're the worst team. I think they win that game. Pitt, however, that game for me could potentially be a toss-up. Pitt is moving their way up the power rankings. They've got a true freshman quarterback in Mason Heinschel who's playing really well right now. Pitt went into Florida State and won a few weeks ago. You guys just saw them last week, and maybe that wasn't the cleanest game for Pitt, but they found a way to get the job done. They have NC State this week, which I think is going to be a great game. So No, I'm not confident that Georgia Tech is going to run the table and make it to the ACC championship game. And there's also one other factor here at play. You could end up, or we could end up, with either 3 teams that are undefeated in ACC play in Georgia Tech, Virginia, and SMU. They don't play each other in the regular season. And then what is that tiebreaker going to look like? Someone potentially who's undefeated in ACC play could get left out. I highly doubt that scenario happens for the reasons I just said. But you could also end up with a bunch of one-loss teams that are sitting there tied at the top, and who wins the tiebreaker in those scenarios. So that's why I feel like it's not as clear-cut, and I'll say it right now. I do not think that there will be a team that finishes undefeated in ACC play this year. That's going to be my prediction for the remainder of the year.
Okay. Yeah, that would certainly send everything into chaos if that happens. You touched on Florida State a little while ago. They got off to the great start, and they continue to be snake bitten. I mean, that Stanford game, they probably should have won it 3 different times, and review goes against them there in the closing seconds on the last play of the game, and they end up losing. What does Florida State do with Mike Norvell? Because, he's got this resume where, just a couple years ago, they're undefeated. They get snubbed from the college football playoff. Then the playoff gets expanded, and they've been awful ever since. They had the 2-10 season. It seemed like the team quit. This year, similar type of nosedive. But he's also very capable, right? Because we saw just 2 years ago where they were. So if you're Florida State, what do you do with Mike Norvell? What are you hearing about that situation?
Yeah, it's a great question because I think a lot of people are wondering the same thing. And Michael Alford, their athletic director, put out a statement earlier this week that they were going to do a comprehensive review at the end of the season. Michael Alford's not a fan of midseason coaching changes for head coaches. He never has been. He's always kind of taken a more rational approach to that. And I know there's a bunch of Power 4 job openings right now that probably put pressure on athletic directors to make decisions like now when they're not ready to make decisions. I think there's a couple of things. Number one, the money's going to be significant, right? His buyout's roughly $54 million. To buy out the entire staff is going to cost about $72 million. Florida State, as you guys know, just spent a ton of money on legal fees with the ACC. Renovated their football stadium, and they're opening a new football operations center that they're moving into actually this week. So the money is one thing. But I think the second thing here is a weighing of where the fan base is in terms of if they bring Mike Norvell back, are they going to have a bunch of people who've lost confidence in his leadership, who are not going to donate, who are going to cancel season tickets, who are not going to provide to NIL? And I think weighing those costs certainly has to factor into whatever decision is made. If you look at just the numbers standing alone by themselves, if Florida State finishes with a losing record this season, that will be 4 losing seasons in 6 for Mike Norvell. And if you're at Florida State after 6 years, is that a tenable position to be in? Yes, they won an ACC title in 2023, but the snub, quite frankly, to me, feels like has delivered a dagger to this program that may be difficult for Mike Norvell to recover from. And so I know he talked today about how they're going to fix it and they're going to get it right. And if I had $1 for every time I've heard Mike Norvell say that over the last 6 years, I'd be able to go and buy a bunch of stuff at Target right now, maybe more than Target. But you know what I'm saying. I've written that story a lot over the last 6 years. So we'll see how they finish. If they finish 8-4, I feel like that's where people thought Florida State was going to be at the beginning of the year, but they beat Alabama, and suddenly people thought this was the best team, including me, who had them number 1 in the power ranking. So it's a complicated situation. I don't think there's a clear-cut, easy answer right now, and I think the decision makers at Florida State just want to see how this whole thing plays out before they go ahead and make any changes.
Yeah, and the timing is not good, right? They were pounding their fist. We need more from the ACC. We're going to leave, and then they lose 9 straight conference games, and that's I would assume that's got to play into it as well. Paula, you got one last thought?
You could have your own personal Jodeci concert with that kind of money.
Yes, you could.
Oh my gosh! So now I'm going to ask Mike Norvell to keep saying these things so I can get my personal Jodeci concert.
Andrea, thanks so much for coming on. This was a lot of fun. We appreciate it.
All right, thanks for having me.
All right.